Hey, my bookish friends. Welcome back to my channel. Grab your snacks because today we're diving into a bit of drama, not drama, that I came across while I was scrolling through booktok. And it involves none other than Victoria Aveyard. Yeah, the Red Queen herself. And it not only involves her, but a small publisher named Counterpoise Press. I might be exaggerating because I don't know if this is drama, but I was sensing a bit of drama, okay? I was like, I need to talk about it. Not because it involves, a bit of drama, but more so about the issue that was presented in the whole exchange, okay? Because I'm going through this exchange and I'm like, ooh, okay. There are some points that we need to discuss. There are definitely some things that need to be said as well with the whole thing. Now, I will be providing the screenshots so that you guys can actually see the exchange. Because the minute it was happening, I said, just in case something gets deleted, pop, pop, pop. You guys know it's always important to carry evidence everywhere you go, okay? Now, the big question that really sparked all of this was basically, when can a small press actually call themselves a trad publisher, a traditional publisher? And more importantly, who gets to decide? So today we're going to get into it. And trust me, I feel like this is going to be a really interesting conversation, especially for those of us who are in the publishing industry, who are authors, who want to get into publishing. I think it's a really, really interesting conversation. So first, let's set the scene. The whole debate kicked off when Counterpoise Press, when they dropped a TikTok with the caption, stop calling yourself a trad publisher, which is basically, it was in quotes, something that someone or something that they've probably heard quite a few times. The post wasn't attacking anyone, but they were, trying to make a point about, who should be able to use the term trad, or people who think they should rethink using the term trad. They weren't shy about flexing that trad title, and that's what really sparked the debate, okay? Because they were not shy at all about flexing what they bring to the table. They made points about how they pay authors, how much they invest in editing, 5 figures, how they invest all of that into editing, design, marketing. 5 figures, that's quite a lot, my guys. And they also emphasize how readers can find their books in major bookstores. I mean, honestly, from where I'm sitting and from what I know, even from the research I've done, I was like, that sounds like a traditional publisher to me, These guys are out here doing what the big 5 publishers do, just on a smaller scale. And spoiler alert here, guys, that doesn't make them any less legitimate, okay? So, they're out here, they're like, hey, we're following the traditional publishing model here. We're paying authors, we're putting real effort into making sure books get into readers' hands. And I'm sitting here like, yeah, that sounds like a publisher to me, 100%. But then cue the queen herself, Victoria Aveyard. And what's really, really interesting? I feel like I've been seeing her name pop up in drama or drama adjacent posts quite a lot recently, and I'm just like, oh my dear, please, you're someone who a lot of people love. Let's not sully your good name here by getting embroiled in some drama, okay? Because there was some drama with her, with the whole authors talking about another author who may have written their entire book with AI getting traditionally published. There's a lot. And then even with that drama, I'm just I was sensing a bit of a pattern, which is why I really wanted to speak on this. But let's get back into that, and then we can get into that. Victoria Aveyard is the one who has that great reputation. She's written Red Queen, and that's basically a YA dystopian staple. She comes in, she swoops in the comment section like it's a royal decree, and she drops her comment. She's like, indie presses are very real and legitimate, and not a bad thing to be labeled as. And I get it, there's nothing wrong with being an indie publisher, okay? Indie presses are out here doing their thing, okay? And that's amazing. And remember, we should be supporting them. But then she continues with, it's important to use the labels correctly because traditional publishing houses have a very specific definition. We're getting into it now, yeah? She's basically saying you can't just call yourself a trad if you don't have basically the big five budget to back it up. And at first I was like, okay, Victoria, ooh, you coming off as a bit shady, you know? Because there is a very specific definition of what makes a publisher traditional, you know? But the thing is, I started to think, is it really black and white? And that's where I really started to start doing a bit of research because I'm just like, as she continued to, make her point, because obviously people were responding with like, considering what a traditional publisher is meant to be in terms of like they pay their authors, in terms of like them handling all of the editing, this and that, them being in like major retailers, like those are the rules of publishing. So I was just like, okay, like those are the rules. So where are you going with this? But then she kept going, and I was just like, okay, Miss Aveyard, I kind of see your point. Let me get into it, okay? Here's the deal. Victoria is pointing out that trad publishing means more than just doing all those things. It means more than just ticking off those boxes. It means like having a certain scale. It's about revenue, resources, and infrastructure. So she's basically saying that if you're a small press with a limited budget and smaller operations, you don't get to claim the trad label. Which, as I was looking into it, I was just like, okay, I see where she's coming from. I understand where she's coming from. Because when you think about traditional publishing, when someone says, oh, I'm traditionally published, you think about the big five. And if you don't know who the big five are, that's Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Macmillan, Hachette, and Simon and Schuster. They've got millions, sometimes billions of dollars backing them. They have massive resources, massive marketing budgets, and every book they publish has the weight of their name on it. But the press, the publishing house in this situation, Counterpoise Press, they came in there just like, hold on. We're doing everything these big five publishers are doing. We're just doing it on a smaller scale. Why is that a problem? Okay. And so that's where things, start to get a bit complicated, because Victoria has a point when she is saying that the big five have more resources, they have more reach, they do. It's undeniable. They've got the infrastructure, the marketing muscle, the prestige. That's a really big point that I think she was definitely trying to make. But let's not pretend that small presses aren't following the same model. Side note, I also think it was very, very funny that there was a point that she was trying to make. Like, she was trying to point to the fact that, yes, to be a traditional publisher, you need to have all those things, pay your authors, do all that, but there's more to it. But she couldn't put it into words, and I'm just like, as someone who's an author, that's concerning, especially because you're coming into this space as someone who is knowledgeable. Like, that's how she presented herself. I have been traditionally published for ages. I've been in the game long. I know what I'm talking about. Like, that's how she presented herself. That's not what she said, but that's how she presented herself. But you couldn't like put into words that, it was the prestige, the resources, the marketing, the infrastructure that is necessary to be known as a traditional publisher. So I found it really funny that she couldn't put it into words as like a traditionally published author. I was just like, sis, isn't this your entire career? like, and you guys know me, I always throw shade. Like, I'm not, like, I love Victoria Aveyard's books. Like, I'm a Red Queen girly from back in the day, even though she broke my heart. It's okay. So I'm not even trying to say, Victoria, like, I'm coming for your neck. But you know what, guys? I always have to throw a bit of shade because we have to call a spade a spade. And a spade is a spade in this situation because, babes, you should have been able to say what you wanted to say in a bit clearer terms. But, that's literally just a side note of shade. But all love still to Victoria, at this point. Because, once again, we cannot pretend that, like, small presses like Counterpoise aren't following the same model as traditional publishers. Counterpoise, they're paying royalties, they're investing in high quality editing and design, they're doing the damn work, to get books in physical bookstores, in national bookstores. Okay, so like, the question then becomes, like, really, they can't call themselves trad because they don't have the prestige, even if they're doing the same thing. And here you're kind of like sat down because and then you start to think, first and foremost, no. Who actually gets to decide? Is it Victoria? Does she have the final say on what can and can't be considered trad? Is there a magical rule book we're all missing? Like, I saw this interaction and I was just like, I saw where Victoria was coming from, but at the same time I was like, I don't necessarily fully agree. The thing is, the debate isn't about what's technically right. I think it's much deeper than that. I think right now, as I was reading it, I was just like, the issue right here is this prestige. Because here's what I'm saying, the big five publishing houses have built this aura of exclusivity. They have the name that authors dream of being published under. And when you're an author trying to make it in the industry, being published by a big five publisher is kind of the gold standard. Because let's be honest, for a lot of authors, a lot of them do not earn out of their advances, at least not in the UK. So in the UK, I believe the statistic is that about 20 to 25% of authors actually earn out of their advances. Now, if you don't know how an advance works, it's basically kind of publishers' collateral, I would say. So essentially, you make a deal, well, your agent makes a deal on your behalf, and that's from their research and from how much they believe in you. That's how much they're just like, okay, you're definitely going to make at least this much amount of money. We know that we're going to make this amount of money from you. Some people have really, really big advances, but very few do. Majority, get 4 or 5 figures at most. Only a few people crack the 6-figure advances. Like, that's very, very rare. Okay, like, it's very incredibly rare. Some people barely crack 6-figure deals, let alone advances. It's like not going to happen. But yeah, the advance is basically what they give you and what they expect to earn from your book. And once you earn out of that advance, that's when you actually start making money, essentially. So if a publisher signs a contemporary romance author and they give them an advance of 10,000, they essentially give you a lump sum of 10,000. Might not be paid in one lump sum, but you basically get, like, that's your payment for this book. Now, say it takes, I don't know, like 1,000 books for you to sell, for you to actually, for the publisher to make that 10,000 back. If your book only sells 500, then you technically have not earned out of your advance. So you have not made a profit. You only start making a profit once they sell over 1,000 of the book. Once they make back that 10,000 that they gave you. Okay. So, yeah, I know I'm doing a lot of explaining, but just in case, some people haven't looked into all of these, like, small details, I just want to make sure. But yeah, so with traditional authors, a lot of them don't earn out of their advances. It's very, very rare. And outside of earning out of your advance, even when they start earning money, you have to remember that the publishers get a cut, your agent gets a cut. Like, there are so many things that, takes from the money that is going to come to you, which means that if a book is selling for £15, if the author, earns out of their advance and they start making a profit, they do not make the full £15. That the full £15 does not go to them, not at all. They get a share of that once everyone gets their cut. And so that's why being an author, even if you're traditionally published, is not going to automatically mean that you're going to be rich and, be uber successful. Quite a lot of traditionally published authors still have 9-to-5s or still have part-time jobs. And that's just how it is. Like, the industry is, honestly, when you start looking into it, you're realizing, oh, there's so much to this that I didn't actually clock. Which is why I always say, like, if you're definitely considering publishing a book, becoming an author, whatever, you really need to look into it, because with traditional publishers, with all of those details, a lot of times indie publishers actually outperform traditional publishers in terms of revenue. But here we come back to the point that is being made, the prestige. There are a lot of indie publishers that are so much more successful than traditionally published authors, quite a lot. Like if you even go just on Amazon, you'll see like indie published books that have 4.7 stars, and they'll have 50,000 reviews, and then you'll see a traditionally published book with 500 reviews, still like a good amount, like still like 4.5 stars, 4.7 stars, but only 500 reviews. Like they haven't sold that much, but those two books could have been released at the same time. But then the indie published book will be garnering much more revenue, so that author is making so much more. Obviously, if it's on Amazon, or if you distributed it with a partner, that partner is going to get a share, but you will still be making more than you would have been making if you're traditionally published. So when it comes to like publishing, it really is a case of what do you consider to be success. Because if success to you is how much books are selling, how much money you're making, I won't even lie, indie publishers might be winning a bit. Some indie publishers are still struggling on that end, but honestly, a lot of them are doing quite well for themselves without being published by one of the big five, and that's absolutely cool. But here is the thing, a lot of people, even though they can probably make more money being an indie published author, they will still fight to be traditionally published because they want that prestige, especially if you have been writing all your life, and since you were a child you wanted to be a published author. You were reading all of these books from Penguin and HarperCollins and Simon and Schuster. You're reading all of these books and you're just like, I want to have my my name on the shelf with the little penguin on it. I want my book to have that little symbol on it. For a lot of people, that's what success means for them, to have that, that stamp of approval that I've been published by a big five author. And I think that's where like the major issue comes from, because for a lot of people, being published by the big five, that's the gold standard. But then I was really just, after the whole like interaction and I was doing all my research, I'm just like, does it have to be? Like, does the big five, well, do the big five do they have to be the gold standard? Do smaller presses really need the big five stamp of approval to be real traditional publishers? Or is the real issue that the big five don't want their prestige watered down by smaller publishers who are doing the same work? And I think that's where we get there. Let's talk about why this debate matters as well, especially for authors, because this is where it gets personal. I'm not just talking about the publisher's label. I'm talking about the actual authors who are trying to navigate this space, because labels matter. We can't pretend like they don't, especially in the society that we live in. We can't pretend that they don't. They do. If an author gets signed by the big five, or one of the big five, obviously, that opens doors automatically. And that is part of what Victoria Aveyard was pointing to. An indie author, they work so hard and they do a lot, and you have to give big props to them 100%. And not to say that traditionally published authors don't work as hard, but once you're signed with the big five, and you see how I interchange traditional publishers with big five, that's another thing that she was referring to. When people say traditional publisher, automatically you think of the big five. But yeah, once you're signed to the big five, that's automatically making your path just a bit more easier than that of a smaller press author. Because you automatically get more marketing, you automatically get access to bigger deals, automatically get more exposure. Like, if an author is signed with them, that's what they expect as an author signed with the big five. But if an author is signed with a smaller press or with an indie press, that isn't calling themselves traditional, even if they may be using that traditional model, then that's a whole different conversation about visibility and credibility. Let's not get that fact twisted either, because there is that credibility that comes with being a big five. Because yes, there's a lot of like smaller presses and indie publishers which are very reputable, but you know, they still don't have as much reputation as the big five publishers. See, in the eyes of the general public and, to be honest, quite a few agents, being with a trad publisher might still be the golden ticket. So if small presses can't call themselves trad, even though they're following the exact same publishing model, it feels like they're being denied access to, you know, the potential to gain that prestige that comes with that label. But it's like, is the prestige worth it if they're doing everything else the same? Like, truly, there were so many things that I was just going through my mind, because if you're doing everything the same as the traditional publishers, like, the prestige, where is that prestige coming from? We're doing everything the same. Do I really have to fight for the same prestige? Like, nothing is different, you know? But let's get to the heart of the issue. Does trad really have to be so exclusive? You know, that's really what I'm getting to. Because my question is, why does the big five get to hold the monopoly on being traditional? Because as Victoria was making her, as she was making her arguments on that thread, or, you know, in that comment space, I was just like, Victoria, I do I do adore you, babe, but it's giving a bit mean girl, because it was literally giving you can't sit with us energy, you know? The what I got from all the comments that she was making about, you know, why Counterpoise couldn't use the traditional label was the fact that the minute other people started using the label, then the prestige of the big five starts to diminish, and then so it they're just like, well, I don't carry the same prestige as being a part of their house because now everyone's traditionally published. That's the vibe I was getting, and I didn't like it. I was just like, it's giving Mean Girls, giving You Can't Sit With Us, it's giving, you know, it's a very exclusive club, and even though you do everything the same, like, only the people in this club get all the attention. And I was just like, I don't like that at all, you know? Just because a press is small doesn't mean they're not operating traditionally. Once again, while I did understand Victoria's point that traditional publishing means more than just the model of traditional publishing, I'm just like, that's what we've come to know it as. But at the end of the day, the model of traditional publishing, which is what should count for who gets to call themselves traditional publishers, is being followed. So at the end of the day, why can't, you know, small presses who follow that model call themselves traditional publishers? You know, they might not have the budget to throw millions at an ad campaign, but that doesn't mean that they're not doing the core work of traditional publishing. And that's what I think really, really matters. You know, it's like saying, oh, you're a small restaurant, so you can't call yourself a restaurant because you don't have a Michelin star. Do you see how ridiculous that sounds? If we were to go to all the restaurants and calling themselves restaurants that don't have Michelin stars, we're like, oh, you know, you can just call yourself a food space or a mini restaurant, you know, but you're not really a full restaurant because you don't carry, you know, these Michelin stars. That's not how it works. Like, genuinely, I don't think that's how it works. If you're offering the same food, if you're doing the same work, why can't you claim the same label? Why is the scale so important? Is it really the size, or is it about maintaining exclusivity for the big five? Because at this point, I'm like, maybe obviously it's because she's been so used to being part of the big five and having that prestige that comes with it, that she doesn't even realize. But I'm just like, sis, what you're doing is you're really more so perpetuating like this this gatekeeping in an industry that we're trying to help break out of its gatekeeping culture. I'm like, babes, I don't think this is I don't think this is the argument that you want to be making. Like, because she kept going, and she like Counterpoise actually made another follow-up video like, using her comment as the base. And then she came and she responded again, and she kept responding, and I was just like, is this really the hill you're going to die on? And I was just like, this is problematic if this is the hill that you're going to die on. You really don't want people to carry the same label that you have. Because truly, I was like, I don't like this. I don't like the vibe I'm getting from here. Because yeah, I don't. Because I understand, like I said, I understand part of what she's saying. Because when people say traditional publishers or, trad publisher, they automatically assume big five. So one of the points that she was making is that you don't want to mislead anyone. In the sense that, if someone hears that you're traditionally published, they will automatically assume that you have the same reach, that you have the same power, the same resources. And I'm just like, at this point, I really was just like, babes, you're really, really giving mean girl here. Because how much are you going to underestimate people who want to become published authors? You really think that someone who is trying to be a published author will go to a publisher and not look at the publisher's background, will not do their actual research into who the publisher is, who they've published before? Really? I was just like, do you take everyone who isn't published by a big five publisher as being an ignoramus? I was just like, I can see where she thought that point was going, but I'm like, that point didn't land where you thought it was going to land. Oh, come and publish your book with us. We're a traditional publisher. Oh, yeah, sure. I'm not going to do any research about, your background, your history, your previous works, what you can and can't do, your reach. I'm not going to do any research on that, okay? And I'm just going to be happy. Like, is that what she thinks is going to happen? I think what she was really concerned about is the fact that there will now be people who will be able to turn around and say, I'm a traditionally published author. And she doesn't want people who are not published by the big five to be able to say that. Again, with this like idea of prestige and exclusivity and being part of this club, this exclusive club that no one else can get into. That's what it was giving. And honestly, I was just like, I don't think this is the hill you want to die on. So, once again, still love Red Queen. And I think maybe I'm gonna give Miss Victoria the benefit of the doubt, but I'm just like, babes, I don't like the points that you were making. Again, shade to the fact that you couldn't like articulate yourself from the comments I've seen so far. Shade to that still. I'm still throwing my shade at that because it's actually funny. Because if you weren't trying to give that vibe of you can't sit with us and you just didn't articulate yourself well, again, ultra shade to that. You're an author, do better. I mean, you still cool, girl, but if you continue on this mean girl energy, I might have to take that back and say you're not that cool. So, let's get that sorted out. But y'all know me. I got my opinions. I always got my opinions. Because that's literally just me. I definitely have strong opinions on this, on a lot of things. So when I saw this, I'm just like, nah, I gotta speak on this. Because from where I stand, if you're following the traditional publishing model, paying authors, investing in editing, design, marketing, distribution, and offering royalties, you are a trad publisher, because that is the traditional publishing model, period. End of discussion, whether you're a big five or not. Okay? Let's stop acting like the big five is the only one who can do it right. Okay? They're not the only one who can execute, who can do it correctly. They're really not. Okay? Smaller presses are out here doing it just as well, and sometimes even better in some cases. Okay? And honestly, trying to gatekeep the term trad is genuinely so messy, especially because this isn't even a publisher. Because in my head, I'm thinking, did your publisher go and tell you to go in, jump down the throat of this small press to defend their honor or something? Like, that was so... I'm like, sis, it was messy. It was messy. That's why at the beginning, I'm just like, it's drama, but it's not, because she was being a bit messy. She really was. It's not about who you are. It's about what you're doing when it comes to publishing. In my view, especially in this issue, like, I'm like, what are they doing? They're executing it well. Okay, end of discussion, right? If the work is traditional, it is traditional. Like, I'm looking at it and I'm just like, are we gonna call a spade a spade? Let's look at it. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, what the heck is it? A cat? No, it's a duck. So if it looks like it's traditional and it's working like it's traditional, then it's traditional. I'm so sorry. Let's not get all caught up in the politics of publishing prestige. You know, if you're running a legit press with a focus on quality and support for your authors, then you're doing the same work, just on a smaller scale. You know, end of discussion. Period. Okay, with a T. So now that I've dropped all my opinions, don't at me. I'm so sorry. I said what I said. What do you think? Should small presses be allowed to call themselves traditional, trad, you know, however you want to say it? Or do we need to keep it exclusive to the big five or publishing houses that have like huge budgets? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Oh yeah, do feel free to at me. You guys know I'd be joking. Like, do feel free to at me if you want. I'll be there. I'm gonna see it. It's all right. It's all right. Much love as always, guys. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more, especially when it comes to publishing, if you want me to dig deeper into publishing topics like this, you know, looking into, you know, how the publishing world works, let me know, you know. And of course, y'all know the drill. Be liking, be sharing, be commenting, be subscribing if you're not already, you know, and obviously hit that bell so you never miss a video. Until next time, guys, keep reading, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep doing better, okay? Let's not be messy up in these streets. We can do better. I'll see you guys next time.